So let's start with Captain Randy Kramer. He is a U.S. Marine and a super soldier who served for 17 years on Mars, defending the Mars colonies. He was part of Project Moonshadow and was assigned to the Mars Defense Force from a covert military branch, United States Marine Corps Special Section, set up by President Eisenhower as a unit that would uphold moral ethics and hopefully keep things in check in regards to the activity of MJ-12 and some of their more unscrupulous members. His story, information, and accounts give us insight into things that other whistleblowers have been speaking about in relation to Alternative 3 and the establishment of bases on Mars. Since he has spoken out because his chain of command requested him to do so, he's not so much a whistleblower, really more of a direct representative of the USMC Special Section. He has experiences that take us into an in-depth understanding of ET races that are interacting with Earth, covert agendas that are affecting the whole of humanity, and information about off-planet military activity that has been kept deep black and that he is now sharing with us. And so it's really a pleasure to have you here with us, Captain Randy Kramer. Welcome.
Thank you for having me again, Dr. Dream. It's nice to be back.
So, Randy, go ahead and take us into your story.
Sure. Since we're all trying to cram everybody's together, I'll try and keep it as brief as possible because it gets to be a long one. Essentially because of programs in the late 60s, super soldier programs that were going around in the various sundry of agencies that were all working on them, the United States Marine Corps Special Section was displeased with the ways and means and the results of most of the super soldier programs, which really were breaking apart people's minds and bodies in order to make them completely malleable, and was essentially creating a shorter lifespan, shorter usage, less efficient kind of super soldier than one if you did it in a better way. And so United States Marine Corps Special Section devised a program called Project Moonshadow, which was to try and essentially what we sort of in shorthand call with the grain training as opposed to against the grain training. So instead of really trying to bend someone against their natural will, it's much more of a system of trying to use the more natural incentives that a person would want to have in order to defend their people, their community, their planet, and so forth, instead of just being forced to kill anything that moves, which really, really night and day difference when you're talking about creating a human being into one or the other. So I was essentially genetically engineered from the ground up and born in 1970 and put into a training program when I was 3.5 years old that went until I was 17 years old. And then when I was 17 years old, all of these soldiers that were produced in Project Moonshadow, which was a 300 subject program, was then parceled to a larger group called Project Mannequin. Project Mannequin is this larger umbrella that absorbs many of the super soldier programs around the world and then parcels out those soldiers to various agencies and divisions and defense groups that need them, that are both planet-side, planet-wide, outside of the planet and off-world. So when I was parceled from Project Moonshadow into Project Mannequin then sends a bunch of us to Lunar Operations Command, which is on the backside of the moon, where different people were parceled out into different organizations. I, for luck of the draw or whatever, was sent to be contracted out to the MDF, which is the Mars Defense Force, which is contracted to the MCC, which is the Mars Colony Corporation, to defend the colonies and whatever mining programs and whatever else that they're doing on Mars. So from Lunar Operations Command, then we boarded a pretty large ship. I want to say, I mean, it must have carried, at least 1,000 people or something like that. And we took off from the moon, came in a little closer to Earth to get one last view, and then took off to Mars. But from what I understand, not being able to see the trip, it was really short. So the ship, I believe, was using some kind of larger wormhole creation or teleportation technology to get there. So the trip really, once we were, okay, now we're leaving to our destination, I want to say it was less than 15 minutes or something like that. So, okay, now we're here. And then we landed on Mars down at a place called Ares Prime, which is the headquarters of the Mars Colony Corporation, where was put into a line as you go through, follow the yellow line with your file. Someone's scanning your packet as you go through and then directing you to other shuttles. And then I was taken off to a place called Forward Station Zebra, where I spent the next 17 years, 3 months, 15 days, but who's counting, as a member of Special Tactical Operations Division 098, Forward Station Zebra, Mars Defense Force. That's the short version of that. And then essentially that 17-year, 3 months, 15-day period was a lot of patrolling the area from the quadrants in the grid that we were sort of responsible for at Forward Station Zebra. And essentially most of that involved occasional altercations with one of two sentient species that were living near us, one reptoid, one insectoid. What over time became a larger conflict when draconian reptiles got involved, and it got into this crazy four-way, from where I was standing, a four-way conflict, but it could have been more than that, could have been many, many more people involved in that. And that went on for a number of years until, long story short, some truth and understanding came to understand that the draconians were really just trying to stir everybody up and get everyone hating and trying to kill one another instead of engaging in this sort of casual ground combat, which was really what we were doing up until that point, which was, it was battle and it was war and people got hurt, but it wasn't anything like what happened when the draconians got involved. It just went from, I guess if you study war, there are different types of tribal and cultural war, where war wasn't always the point to just, kill and slaughter your enemy. Sometimes it was just to engage them, be tough, rah, 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 bunch, bang your sticks and your shields together and, be sort of fierce and impressive and engage physically and not necessarily slaughter your enemy. And it was more like that until the draconians got involved. And then it got really, really, really ugly. And then again, after some time, we sorted that out through some very complicated chain of events, and there was a peace agreement that was signed, and then the war ended. And but at that point, I was essentially transferred from Forward Station Zebra after an event that pretty much wiped out almost the entire division and our sister division, 097, and. Then I was sent to flight school and got to be a pilot and promoted, and then was stationed aboard the EDF SS Nautilus, so many acronyms, for the remainder of my 20-year tour, and made the rank of captain at that point, and got to fly around as part of Project Radiant Guardian, defending the solar system kind of thing. But since we're talking about Mars, that is the sum up of my Mars experience. So a lot of people ask me questions about the colonies, and I just have to say that I know very little, next to nothing about the colonies. We were certainly a certain space between them and anything else that supposedly might be threatening to them. So our job was to really be the buffer zone from anything outside the colonies to the colonies in the particular area of quadrants that we were supposed to be protecting. So I really don't know much about that, other than I hear that they use some kind of fancy, names like Cassiopeia, Andromeda, and something like that, sort of, Roman constellation names or something like that. But I really don't know. I will say this: the air where we were at was thin, usually cold but breathable. Not really survivable without an environment suit, so we were in, full powered body armor environment suits pretty much all the time when we were outdoors. I think I mentioned earlier that we did get the occasional dusting of snow across the landscape where I was at, so I'm pretty sure it was far north, but I couldn't exactly tell you where without being able to find it on a map somewhere, looking at the planet, looking at the pictures, which I was looking at ESA, European Space Administration photos, which were way better than some of the photos that NASA was sending back a while back, and was able to see some things that were interesting, but not able to really track down my area. And I just would say this about what I know about the planet Mars. It's such an amazing place, and from what the locals have told me about what else is going on around the planet, it's something. I mean, we can look at it from the outside and see this big red ball, somehow think that there's this simple, mono ecosystem, mono habitat system, or non-habitated or monoculture, when I think it's very complicated. I think that who and what could be there, and the number of different enclaves that they have and communities that they have, almost all underground, of course, at this point, are very wide and varied, from at least 2 different species of insectoid and reptoid, not to mention what I understand the cultural differences between the reptoid species at this point, which is quite varied. So they're not cohesive at all. They're not necessarily in like a constant state of war with each other. That's how they nearly destroyed their planet in the first place. So they don't do that so much anymore. But some of them are still very aggressive, and you don't necessarily just want to walk up and say, "Hey, how you going? Can I get a hug?" Because they still might eat you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're really hostile or warlike. They certainly have no intentions beyond the planet. They really would much rather sort out what's happening with their own world. They really don't care at all to go in outside of their planet, to come here, go anywhere else, get involved in anybody else's business. They're very, very focused on what's happening in their neck of the woods, in their corner, and really could care less, to be honest, about anything that's happening outside their stratosphere, as long as it doesn't affect them. But I would say that my encounter with them, they're highly intelligent, highly organized, and have their own kind of interesting ethical premise of how they do things and why they do things. So I say that they have not only an intelligence and a technological intelligence and a scientific understanding and whatever you want to call their own psyche or psychological understanding of their own self and their own behavior and living things, but they also have an ethical and a moral center that may be defined by their own standards of ethics or morals, but nonetheless they have one. So I find that in this continued comparison of sort of what's more similar about us as a life form than what's different, that in that way, they're very much like us, that they think, they feel, they understand technology, they have their own psychological behaviors, they have their own motivations for things, and they certainly have their own judgments about things and their own predisposed notions about things. But they also have their own, system of ethics and morals that is how it defines their existence and defines how they should go about what they do. So they're not just, barbarians or savages, running around doing whatever they feel like, so much as really being guided by whatever it is they consider their center ethic and moral to be. Which my understanding is their connection with the planet. Their connection with their planet is their source of everything, in much way that our connection to our planet is our source of everything. So they feel their being connected to their planet is their way of staying true to their ethics and their morals and their behavior, and pretty much base everything they do on that. But my understanding in interacting with the northern tribes is that the southern tribes are quite a bit more hostile, quite a bit less friendly, quite a bit more likely just to engage in a fight with you, just to test your mettle, just to see if you're worthy of having a conversation with, or whether you're just worthy to be food. So certainly any diplomatic efforts to communicate or work or cooperate with them has to both be peaceful and from a point of strength. You can't just go open-armed and non-violent, or they'll eat you, but you can't just go in aggressive, or they'll think that you want a war. But if you can stand firm and strong, and at the same time not be ready to want to burn them to the ground, then they're completely willing to respect us and have conversations with us. At least that was my experience of them. The reptiles have, I would say, at least 3 distinct, I almost want to say, strains that are within the same species, that almost like a caste system, but not really so much a caste system, more like there's a warrior caste, and then there's kind of like everybody else. And so it's not so much that there's, the warrior caste is an upper caste or a lower caste, so much as that they're just very specific to their job. And everyone else sort of finds whatever their job or skill within the community is to do. But the warrior class is really formidable. They can be anywhere from 7 feet to nearly 8 feet tall and hundreds of pounds. I mean, what I would say an equivalent, because the gravity coefficient is different, but I'd say the equivalent release between 450 and almost 500 pounds. They're huge. They have venom sacs. They spit, caustic venom, which is not fun. They're very strong, big claws. Their skin is really tough. They have 2 hearts and a double circulatory system, kind of a chest cavity, internal organ system, and then an extremity system with hearts pumping both of those, and then sort of a capillary system that engages the 2 of them. But you have to cause blood pressure loss in both systems when you're fighting them to drop one. So they're really, really tough. You can't just shoot one in the heart and then have it drop. It will still come at you unless you get the other heart. But as I've also said before, we're the species from the heavy gravity planet when we go to Mars. So something that is large and strong there, I go to Mars and I'm way stronger than I am here. And, we had power-assisted body armor too. So we absolutely had sort of a more even in some cases, upper hand physically than they did because of our technological advantage and the fact that we came from a heavy gravity planet, compared to Mars anyway, a little bit heavier. But mentally, psionically, they were much more powerful than us. And when they would unleash their psionic attacks, it was really scary, to be honest. And just, I don't even know how to really try and put it into words other than that it would make you question your very presence in the reality that you're in, while at the same time subjecting your brain and your body to a level of pain, torture, anguish, or even bone breaking that you just would defy anything that you thought could be possible. That would just be, you would just, I'm not even sure how else to describe it, except that it was so shocking and so altering of any reality that I understood to be real or false, but at the same time having a physical impact of breaking bones, breaking limbs, ripping people apart, that made it absolutely mentally, physically, and psychically shocking and very difficult to understand. But they didn't use it very often, which I really began to understand that they were not engaging with us in the way that they wanted to crush us. They were engaging in a way that was just, okay, sure, we'll show up to the fight. But when we really pushed them and tried to say, oh yeah, look how tough we are, and they would go, oh yeah, this is how tough we are, and they would really step it up a notch and crush us, absolutely crush us in the field. So, which brings me to the one point that I always want to make about them. We constantly hear people talk about draconians as being this very, very technologically powerful, very, very, very warlike, with few or any competitors in the galaxy that can stand up to them and fight them on a good day. I would like to point out that there was few greater pleasures in my life than watching the native reptiles, the indigenous species reptiles of Mars, rout the draconians and mop up the floor with them like they were kindergartners. It was absolutely one of the most amazing things to see. And I just want to emphasize, for anyone militarily who thinks that we do not have the tactical upper hand, or that we need a tactical upper hand when dealing with draconians, I'm telling you that you want to talk to the native reptoids of Mars, because they can kick their butt left, right, up, down, and any other which direction you would care to see them do it. We just have to either convince them to teach us how to do that, or convince them that it's within their interest and their motivation as being neighbors in the solar system to get involved. But I just want to point out that if there was ever a place where we were hoping to find a neighbor that could, help us stand up to a bully, that's really the neighbor we should be talking to, because they kick their butt hard. The only other thing I think that I would add to all of that is that my chain of command asked me to come public a year ago because they feel that the direction that this is headed has not been in the best interest of the people, has not been to legally reinforced constitutionality, U.S. code, law, military code of justice, all the legal systems that we consider to operate under and be the institutions of what keeps civilization civilized, have really been ignored badly. So badly that they feel they've done everything that they can at every meeting, filed every piece of paperwork, complained the chain of command in every way that they see is feasible for them to do, to the point where they have to say, okay, we then have a legal right under this, Article 21 of the United States Marine Corps Special Section Special Code to allow an officer to, speak publicly and to break secrecy and to do these other things in order to reinforce the return to constitutionality, executive and legislative authority, to rogue systems that are essentially criminal and causing the downfall of everything. If you can bring these systems out of covertness, if you can bring them out of illegality, and you can bring them out of their rogue status, it's possible to bring them back into some form of rule of order, law, justice, and symmetry, and put that back into the infrastructure of a civilization and increase, shore up the civilization that's crumbling around us right now and bring it up to a state of something that can really move forward into the 21st century as a higher evolved, technologically advanced, sophisticated civilization, which we're just, a very, very tiny away from being able to do if we just broke that wall of technological secrecy and we had access to all of the things that these covert programs have. Because clearly, when you start to look at what the major problems are, both social, economic, environmental, energy, medical, and you think, wow, gee, I sure wish we had some better technology that could fix some of this. Well, we do. And we have so much amazing technology that could fix these problems if they were applied and implemented towards them, that it becomes not just mean-spirited, but highly criminal, highly amoral, highly unethical, to the point where they are the treasonous, seditionist persons who are trying to destroy the very foundation of the civilization that we live in, which does not make them agitators, does not make them the other party, does not make them, like I said, mean-spirited. It makes them seditious, treasonous persons who are trying to destroy the very civilization that we stand upon. So trying to restore order, legal authority, and constitutionality to all this is part of what we're also trying to move towards and make people aware of. So we're not just trying to have the conversation of, hey, something is going on that you need to know about. We also want to really have the conversation that there are things that are going on that you don't know about that are illegal, and they need to be brought back into the umbrella of legality so that we can fix them. Because as long as they're under the umbrella of illegality, they will only be something that causes harm to the rest of us. As soon as we can bring those things back under the umbrella of legality and constitutional authority, then there's a hope of restoring civilization to the direction we want it to go.